The seventh chapter in David Epstein's 2019 book Range begins with a description of the remarkable life of Frances Hesselbein.
She never did graduate from college, but her office is festooned with 23 honorary doctorates, plus a glistening saber given to her by the U.S. Military Academy for teaching leadership courses, as well as the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the highest civilian award in the United States. When I visited just after her 101st birthday, I brought her a cup of steamed milk as I had been advised and right away asked what training had prepared her for leadership. Wrong questions. "Oh, don't ask me what my training was," she replied with a dismissing hand wave. She explained that she just did whatever seemed like would teach her something and allow her to be of service at each moment, and somehow that added up to training.
There's nothing exceptional about Hesselbein's childhood. Born in 1915, it's likely that today we'd label her a disadvantaged child, having grown up in the steel mills and coal mines of western Pennsylvania. There's certainly nothing conventional in her experience, education, and training that indicates a deliberate and focused path toward becoming the transformative CEO of the Girl Scouts. In this way, Hesselbein doesn't come across as an outlier, as someone who overcame tremendous odds, or even as a late bloomer who took advantage of a latent but special gift. Instead, Epstein frames Hesselbein as a dark horse, someone who through frequent failure, short-term planning, and constant iteration makes their own novel and circuitous path to success in life, despite social pressure to conform to what seems like the safest and most certain route. A Harvard computational neuroscientist is quoted in the book about their work on the Dark Horse Project, a formal study of the common qualities of successful nonconformists.
Dark horses never look around and say, "Oh, I'm just going to fall behind. These people started earlier and have more than me at a younger age." They are focused on, here's who I am at the moment, here are my motivations, here's what I found I like to do, here's what I'd like to learn, and here are the opportunities. Which of these is the best match right now? And maybe a year from now I'll switch because I'll find something better.
What Epstein gathers from the body of research and expert interviews is what he calls, quote, "at once simple and profound. We learn who we are only by living and not before," end quote. That what reads like long-term planning and consistent achievement is simply a mindset of living as the process of learning. Returning to his interview with Hesselbein.
As has been said regarding Vincent van Gogh's life, some undefinable process of digestion occurred as diverse experiences accumulated. "I was unaware that I was being prepared," Hesselbein told me. "I did not intend to become a leader, I just learned by doing what was needed at the time."
The story of Frances Hesselbein and the subversive puzzle of dark horses like her is one of several connections Epstein makes between lived experience and research. In a world which increasingly demands and incentivizes specialization and hyperfocus at increasingly earlier ages and stages of life, the world also needs, quote, "people who start broad and embrace diverse experiences and perspectives while they progress. People with range." Epstein began his research for range in response to Malcolm Gladwell's famous 10,000-hour rule, which argued that the story of success isn't hidden in biographical details or innate talent, but is really the cumulative advantage of deliberate practice, that one becomes an expert by amassing their respective 10,000 hours. Epstein also responds to the battle hymn of the Tiger Mom, a 2011 book claiming that the secret to raising high-achieving children was, in his words, "choose early, focus narrowly, never waver." The Gladwell Tiger Mom narrative argues that by delaying deliberate practice, or allowing children to deviate and lose focus, you set your child up for a deficit of time from which they may never recover. To set children up for high achievement in music, for example, start your children on the piano or violin as soon as they can walk, and at 1,000 hours of deliberate practice per year, they will be on track to achieve expertise by junior high, when the stakes will be even higher for college acceptance to prestigious universities for which the competition will be as fierce as your tiger parenting style. So the question Epstein asks of tiger parents and other proponents of the 10,000 hours rule, what he calls the cult of the head start, seems simple. Do specialists actually get better with experience or not? And is narrow, deliberate practice the only way to achieve greatness in a given field? The analogy for education systems couldn't be clearer. Given that we have limited time and resources, is it better to align them toward narrow, deliberate practice of specific content and skills that improve short-run success as measured by, say, higher test scores? This is an approach that, if supported, would justify standardization and authoritarian classroom practice. Or is it better to spread those resources out across a range of experiences that may push students in different directions and toward less clearly measurable outcomes, but lead to long-term success as students leverage experience into innovation in the world outside of school, as was the case with Frances Hesselbein. Relaying definitions from the field of psychology, Epstein describes the difference between so-called kind and wicked environments. Kind environments are those in which the rules and patterns are consistent, in which feedback is accurate and immediate. Chess, for example, is the premier kind learning environment where mastery comes from thousands of hours of deliberate practice, and where the highest achieving chess masters are the best at recognizing and responding quickly to the familiar patterns unfolding across the board's 64 squares. The catch is that it's also what makes artificial intelligence so good at the game. Chess is a predictable closed system defined by a rigid set of rules and a finite amount of moves, and for where there is a massive historical data set whose outcomes can be input and analyzed. It's why computers have been beating human beings at chess since IBM's Deep Blue AI beat Grandmaster Garry Kasparov in 1997. Environments in which computers tend to perform poorly are so-called wicked environments, where the rules of the game are often unclear or incomplete. There may or may not be repetitive patterns, and they may not be obvious. And feedback is often delayed, inaccurate, or both. Wicked problems are open-ended, involve the influence of many variables, where the rules change, and which the familiar patterns of one context may fail when applied to another. Wicked environments are the reason autonomous vehicles have been more difficult to develop than chess-playing computers, and why AI performance in medicine has been notoriously poor. After IBM's Watson computer beat Ken Jennings at Jeopardy in 2011, it was immediately co-opted to the study of cancer, where, in Epstein's words, it flopped. The kind domains of chess, golf, and classical music, Epstein argues, are poor models of most things human beings want to learn, but are domains in which hyper-specialization is rewarded with success. He highlights the work of psychologist Barry Schwartz, who studied the ability of participants to discover solutions in a logic puzzle. One group was given a monetary reward for each solution, even if it was the same solution repeated over and over. Think the kind environment of chess, where a winning tactic gets reinforced and used in the next match. When a new group of participants was added to the study and asked to discover all of the possible ways of winning, every student in the new group successfully discovered all 70 possible solutions, while only one student in the previously rewarded group was able to do so. Rewarding short-term success in the kind environment of the logic puzzle reinforced the use of familiar patterns. But past performance was not predictive of future success when the rules changed. In fact, past performance proved counterproductive. Success with familiar patterns made you less likely to think in ways the new situation demanded and rewarded. As Epstein notes, the subtitle of Schwartz's paper became, "How Not to Teach People to Discover Rules." But surely it has to be the case that the mastery of a complex game like chess reaps cognitive benefits across the board. So maybe it's worth 10,000 hours of training if it improves overall intelligence and cognitive performance. Well, not so much. It turns out that while, like chess, memory training games, video games, and music instruction do support near transfer of skills, that is, where areas of performance have significant similarities and overlap, say between chess and checkers. However, there isn't any indication that this specific training directly supports far transfer, that is, improved performance in areas with almost no overlap, say between chess and dance. To quote a summary of this research from the Singapore Times,
what all this shows is that it is unlikely chess has a significant impact on overall cognitive ability. So while it might sound like a quick win that a game of chess can improve a broad range of skills, unfortunately, this is not the case. The fact that skills learnt by training do not transfer across different domains seems to be universal in human cognition. In other words, you get better at best at what you train in, which might just sound like good old-fashioned common sense.
In fact, to turn back to music instruction and training, the evidence seems to support the notion that buying your toddler a violin and sticking to a rigid practice regimen, in the tiger parenting mantra, choose early, focus narrowly, and never waver, might even inhibit their future level of excellence. For example, one researcher in the psychology of music studied British boarding school students and concluded that
it seems very clear that sheer amount of lesson or practice time is not a good indicator of exceptionality. The strong implication is that too many lessons at a young age may not be helpful.
The study found that less skilled students stuck with only a single instrument, and that every single student in the study who spent the most amount of time earlier in their development on structured lessons fell under the study's definition of average, saying not one was in the exceptional group. However, what exceptional students had in common was a distribution of effort across different instruments. 3 seemed to be a key number, and a so-called sampling period, quote, often lightly structured with some lessons and a breadth of instruments and activities, followed only later by a narrowing of focus, increased structure, and an explosion of practice volume, end quote. This sampling period, a time of loosely structured or unstructured discovery and experimentation across a range of activities in a given area, seems vital, and leads what Epstein calls the eventual elites in their fields to draw from a range of abilities and experiences upon which to focus later technical practice. Out of this, a general pattern emerges. Early focus leads to early plateaus and performance ceilings when familiar tools break down in wicked conditions or simply reap diminishing returns over time, while a sampling period of initial unfocused exploration lets you do more later and go further by building a more robust and responsive toolkit to wield against the changing conditions of the wicked world. Which brings us back to school. While 10,000 hours of deliberate practice undoubtedly trains human beings to better recognize and respond to the particular patterns of a kind environment, that is, to get better at the game the more you play it, is school a kind domain like chess that lends itself to the 10,000-hour approach? If it is, does our preparation for students in the kind world of school really prepare them for life outside its walls? Or does it prove counterproductive or even maladaptive when the rules change and those hours of training fail to transfer? And to what extent does this kind, wicked framing help us understand the divide in our approaches to education? The notion of wickedness seems to confirm what we understand about the narrowness of writing instruction in schools, for example, in which students master the patterns and rules of, say, the 5-paragraph essay or an AP free response rubric as a proxy for authentic writing. Writing is a wicked problem that in many cases is formed by convention, but ultimately comes down to the questions a writer must ask about themselves, their content, and their audience. When school attempts to circumvent this essential interrogation, it reduces writing to a kind problem that author John Warner calls a writing-related simulation, which sounds a lot more like chess than authentic communication. And here we'll quote from John Warner at length.
The 5-paragraph essay is more avatar for the problem than the problem itself. There's nothing troubling about essays with 5 paragraphs, but the 5-paragraph essay comes coupled with some very troubling things. The primary problem is the practices which attach to the teaching of the 5-paragraph essay, and the totalizing system of accountability which privileges the teaching of the 5-paragraph essay. Prescriptive rules, such as a thesis must be the last sentence of the first paragraph, the last paragraph must start with in conclusion and restate the body paragraphs, and each paragraph should have between 5 and 7 sentences, do not help students learn the basic skills of structure and argument. They help them create what I call writing-related simulations, which pass very basic muster on surface-level assessments, but don't actually help students learn to make better arguments or think in the ways we expect in college. Effective argumentation is about learning to make choices consistent with audience, purpose, and message, the rhetorical situation. The way the 5-paragraph essay is employed as prescriptive practice actually prevents students from practicing those far more vital and complicated skills.
Training students in the kind domain of writing-related simulations for the purpose of schooling leads to long-term failure when the tools of the 5-paragraph essay or the AP rubric exceed their purpose in the truly wicked world of authentic writing and communication. These writing-related simulations, much like the chess games analyzed by IBM's Deep Blue AI, are becoming more easily assessed and graded by computer scoring technologies, and to mixed reviews. In a 2018 NPR piece, the Massachusetts Department of Education Deputy Commissioner said there have been, quote, huge advances in artificial intelligence in the last few years, adding, I asked Alexa whether she thought we'd ever be able to use computers to reliably score tests, and she said, absolutely, end quote. Teachers interviewed for the article, on the other hand, sounded skeptical. One English teacher was quoted as saying, the idea is bananas as far as I'm concerned. An art form, a form of expression being evaluated by an algorithm is patently ridiculous. Another asks, what about original ideas? Where is room for creativity of expression? A computer is going to miss all that. Adding, what is the computer program going to reward? Is it going to reward some vapid drivel that happens to be structurally sound? The rise of ChatGPT and other open AI tools throughout 2022 has only heightened the existential critique of essay writing and writing assessment generally. As of January 5th, 2023, the New York Department of Education announced a ban on ChatGPT from school networks and devices. And it turns out that robo-scoring computers love writing-related simulations and score them very favorably. One MIT researcher has even invented an essay generator called the Basic Automatic BS Essay Language Generator, or Babel, designed to exploit AI algorithms and give perfect scores to perfect nonsense. See if you can understand the main idea of this excerpt from a 500-word Babel essay based on a GRE practice prompt.
History by mimic has not, and presumably never, will be precipitously but blithely ensconced. Society will always encompass imaginativeness. Many of scrutinizations, but a few for an amanuensis. The perjured imaginativeness lies in the area of theory of knowledge, but also the field of literature. Instead of enthralling the analysis, grounds constitute both a disparaging quip and a diligent explanation.
Were you able to make sense of that? Don't worry, neither could the researcher who designed the generator, saying, it makes absolutely no sense. There is no meaning. It's not real writing. When fed to the RoboGrader, this not real writing, of course, earned a perfect 6 out of 6 on the GRE scale, and according to their criteria, represents, quote, a cogent, well-articulated analysis of the issue and conveys meaning skillfully, end quote. Writing is communication. When I think of great speeches, essays, and works of world literature, accessing their meaning depends on understanding historical context and culture. Writers demand that readers share a similar vernacular and set of idioms, analogies, and symbolism, or they induct the reader into the club of shared language. Communication fails when this complicated handshake between writer and audience breaks down. And what are we communicating to the RoboGraders? Writing for the audience of an algorithm necessarily reduces the wicked task of writing to a chess game, where the goal is not communion, but rather competition, where communication fails and babble prevails. Well, what about the rest of school? I think this kind wicked framing might actually be one of the more useful frameworks for understanding the divide in our approaches to education. Believe it or not, there are defenders of the RoboGraders. The GRE's automatic scoring software is made by a company called Education Testing Service, or ETS. A senior research scientist at ETS is quoted in the NPR piece saying,
if someone is smart enough to pay attention to all the things that an automated system pays attention to, and to incorporate them in their writing, that's no longer gaming, that's good writing. So you kind of do want to give them a good grade.
systems of efficiency, control, and accountability are inexorably linked. Turning school into a kind game in which those 10,000 hours matter a great deal makes us feel better about controlling their use and their content. It would also demand holding accountable those who would misuse instructional time to less focused ends. And of course, there are institutions whose political and financial interests are in maintaining that control. But ultimately, if our values as educators align with the mission that we need to create a generation of change makers, or call them solutionaries, People who actually understand the world around them, want to make a difference, feel empowered to do so, and are supported along the way, we not only need to rethink what accountability means within the education system, but what kind of system we actually have. If our assumptions about the kindness of school are incorrect, and our response to the feedback of standardized testing and high-stakes assessment have misled us when we train our students to outsmart the robo-grader, we risk misrepresenting to our students the assumptions and measures of the very real and very wicked world. To quote Epstein in the closing pages of the book,
compare yourself to yourself yesterday, not to younger people who aren't you. Everyone progresses at a different rate, so don't let anyone else make you feel behind. You probably don't even know where exactly you're going, so feeling behind doesn't help. Approach your own personal voyage and projects like Michelangelo approached a block of marble, willing to learn and adjust as you go, and even to abandon a previous goal and change directions entirely should the need arise. Even when you move on from an area of work or an entire domain, that experience is not wasted.
After all, there will always be a computer waiting to outsmart the next Grandmaster of Chess or write your essay on the causes of the Protestant Reformation. But there will only ever be one irreplaceable Francis Hesselbein. Human Restoration Project is a nonprofit dedicated to informing and spreading progressive education through free educational programs, resources, and online materials for teachers, families, and students. You can learn more and follow us at humanrestorationproject.org or on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and post at HumResPro. Be sure to add the hashtag RestoreHumanity.